Hello and welcome to the Brofest Beginner's Guide to Elden Ring. Elden Ring is a massive open-world action RPG. It's extremely detailed, quite challenging, and can be quite intimidating for new players. So in this video I'm going to break it down to 4 different sections, including the starting classes of the game, the menu system, the combat system, and finally exploration at the end. So with all that being said, let's get started. One of the first things you'll have to do in Elden Ring is choose what class you want to start the game with. I'm just going to briefly go through the classes of the game, but in order to understand them a bit better, I'm just going to show what each one of the attributes or the stats of each class means, just so you understand what the point of these classes are at the very beginning of the game. These classes are really just how you begin the game, but you're completely free to customize them any way you want in terms of where you want to allocate skill points later on. So if I just go down the list, looking from the Vagabond, which is on the far left, the level is just what level your character starts at, and the level it will continue to grow as you play through the game. If we look at Vigor, that's how much health your character will have, so the more points you put into this, the more health you will have. Mind is to do with your what's called your focus points. It's your bar that indicates the cost of spells and abilities, and it will deplete as you use your different skills in the game. Endurance is your stamina bar, so that includes your sprinting, your rolling, your attack, and the more points you have in here, the more stamina-based abilities you can use. Strength is next, and that's how well your character can wield heavier weapons and armor. So the more strength you have, the kind of bigger weapons you can use, and the heavier armor you can use as well. Dexterity is almost the opposite of strength. That's to do with how well your character can wield light weapons and armor. Intelligence, moving on, is to do with how well your character can use spells and abilities like that in the game. So the more intelligence you have, the more spells you can use. Faith is a bit like the opposite of that in terms of your character can use what's called incantations. Incantations are similar to spells, but they're very much used at close range, and they can do a lot of damage and healing, but they're separate from spells, and I'll maybe cover that later on in the game. And finally, Arcane is your chance to receive more loot in the world and from enemies. That's a brief synopsis of what each one of those numbers means whenever you're looking at that, but I might cover that in more detail later on. Going into the starting classes of the game, I'll begin with the Vagabond here on the left. The Vagabond is very much like your typical sword and shield style class. Very much an all-rounder, can do quite a bit of melee damage, but also has good defense. So probably a good starting place for beginners if you are interested in melee combat primarily. It doesn't start with any spells or incantations, but it does seem to specialize more in sword and shield type gameplay. Moving on from that, we have the Warrior. You'll see the Warrior, the main difference between the Warrior and the Vagabond is that it begins with 2 swords. It does have a shield as well, but it does seem to specialize more with the offensive combat style as opposed to defensive as well. So with 2 swords you can do a lot of damage from the start, but the main thing is you wouldn't necessarily have as much defense as another class like the Vagabond, so you would need to get good at rolling, dodging, staying out of the enemy's way, and then going in to do a lot of damage from the start. So if that's your style of gameplay, the Warrior is definitely for you. Moving on, we have the Hero. When we look at the Hero, we can see a big axe and a big shield, very similar to the Vagabond. However, the main stat that the Warrior starts with is high strength, so it's able to wield the heavier weapons and the heavier armor from the very beginning of the game. And aesthetically speaking, you can see it looks more like a barbarian style class. So again, if that's your playstyle, highly recommend the Hero for you as well. Good defense, good offense. Doesn't start off with any spells, but again, if you're more into melee combat without the magic style, then this one here is definitely for you. Moving on, we have the Bandit. The Bandit is my favorite class in the game. This is your typical rogue style starting class. It starts off with a knife and a small buckler. Now the buckler does not block much damage, but it is used for parrying quite well. The thing about the Bandit is it has a short bow as well, so it begins with a bit of ranged damage as well, but it has very, very low health and very low defense. I started with this class, and I have to say it was quite challenging from the very start of the game. However, it did teach me how to get better at dodge rolling and avoiding enemy attacks, but I definitely wouldn't recommend it for beginners. But yeah, I quite enjoyed it actually, it was good. Moving on is the Astrologer. I would highly recommend this class for beginners because this begins with a staff at the start of the game, so it has a lot of spell output, which means you'll do a lot of damage with spells from the very beginning of the game. It also has a sword and shield as well, so you get a bit of all-round combat in terms of a little bit of melee, but mainly focused on spells from a distance. So in theory, you can do a lot of damage from range and then go into melee just to finish off any low health enemies. A really good class for beginners as well. Highly recommend Astrologer if you're new to this series. Moving on, we have the Prophet. Similar to the Astrologer in terms of it starts with high faith, high numbers into its faith ability, but it specializes more in incantations instead of spells. So instead of having your magic or spells cast from a distance, incantations are used at quite close range to do a lot of damage and healing as well. The Prophet starts with a spear and a small shield as well, so you do get a bit of range with the spear from melee combat. And aesthetically, I like the look of the Prophet as well. I love the idea of the tattered robes, the shackles around your ankles, the weird neck brace, and the blindfold as well. It's just a very unique looking class, but probably a bit more challenging than the Astrologer. But it does have a mixture of melee and magic as well, so kind of a hybrid class, but very interesting, very unique. Moving on, we have the Samurai. Another really good one to start with if you're new to this series as a beginner class. The Samurai starts with a katana and a longbow as well, so you do get quite good damage with the katana, and you do get quite good damage with the longbow from a ranged distance as well. I think it also begins with a shield, and you also start with fire arrows, so you've got quite a good mixture of range and melee combat. It doesn't have any spells or magic from the beginning of the game, but if you're interested more in kind of melee style focused combat and you want a good class that does fairly good damage and has fairly good defense, Samurai is for you. And also just looking at the Samurai, it looks great as well. Really good looking armor. Yeah, there's a lot you can do with the Samurai, so another good one for beginners. Moving on, we have the Prisoner, another quite unique class. This is more of a hybrid class in terms of it starts with a sword in its main hand, but also the same staff as the Astrologer in his offhand. So you kind of have a mixture of casting spells with your offhand, but also doing melee damage with your main hand. So kind of a hybrid class, but very, very interesting in terms of how you can build it. Also, just looking at the Prisoner, he looks really unique. I quite like the weird mask that he's got on as well. Probably a bit more advanced than the Astrologer, but if you're interested in doing a mixture of melee and spells, this one here is definitely for you. Next we have the Confessor. This is almost like your typical paladin style build. Big shield, big sword, so you've got good defense and good offense as well. But he also has decent numbers in the faith attribute, which means he can cast incantations as well at close range. So another kind of all-round class. You get sword, shield, and spells. So you start off with quite a bit from the beginning of the game. Another good beginner-friendly class, I would say. Starts off at level 10, so you've already got quite a few points into a few of those attributes. Yeah, another good one for beginners. Finally, we have the Wretch. Now, the whole point of the Wretch is that it begins at level 1 with almost nothing. There's no armor, there's no abilities, no spells. It's just you have a club and you've got 10 points in everything. So the point of the Wretch is that it's an extra challenge at the very beginning of the game, but it also means that you can build your character any way you want to build him. You can put points into anything and have a really unique character that's just for you. However, it would be very, very difficult to play a Wretch at the beginning of the game because you start off with so little in your disposal. So definitely one for more advanced players, would not recommend for beginners, but that's the whole point of the Wretch. Now that we've covered the starting classes of the game, I'll just add that your character can be fully customized throughout the whole game. So the class that you start the game with doesn't necessarily have to be the class that you finish the game with. It's just to get you started at the very beginning of the game. And then as you allocate skill points, you can build your character any way you want. So with all that being said, let's move on to the next section of the game. Okay, so I've just logged into my Bandit here, and the first thing I'm going to talk about is whenever you first begin Elden Ring, the game is automatically set to play in online mode. So what that means is whenever you play online, you can see traces of other players running around the world, which you just saw there on the left hand side, and you can also interact with things called bloodstains on the ground, and what these bloodstains show is that how other players have died. So if I touch that bloodstain, you should see a red outline about a player who seems to have got killed here. And you can also see things in the ground where other players have left notes as well, indicating certain things in the game. You'll see another one just around here as well. I could read that, and another player's left that note. Personally, I don't really like this. I would much rather explore the game by myself. I find these notes in the ground to be very, very distracting, and the bloodstains as well. I get it that the whole point is that you're part of a community and you can help each other out, but personally I like to turn this feature off by going into my system, across here to play online, and I'm just going to change that to play offline, which means the next time I load into the game I'll just play in offline mode and all of that will be gone. So what I'm going to do in offline mode, I'm just going to re-log into the game, and you'll see that all that stuff has disappeared now. Okay, I've just re-logged into the game. I'm now playing in offline mode, and you can see that all those things in the ground have now gone. There's no bloodstain and there's no notes from other players. This is kind of how I like to play because the game is heavily based on exploration, and I do really enjoy discovering things for myself in this game. But the option's always there to go back online if I choose as well. Before I get into much combat and exploration of the game, I'm just going to briefly talk about the menu system in Elden Ring, because it can be quite complex and can be quite intimidating for new players as well, as there's quite a lot going on. So if I bring up my options here, you'll see I'm going to start from the very top left of the screen and just explain what each one of these things mean. So at the very top you see my red bar, that's my health. Of course that'll go down as I take damage. The second bar is my focus points, or FP, it's the blue one, and that determines things like any spells or abilities I may use linked to my weapons. So if I use some of my skills here, go back out, you'll see that blue bar is now going down as I use some of my weapon skills, and that will only recharge whenever I take a certain potion, which I'll explain later on. My green bar is then my stamina. It will go down whenever I do things like sprint, dodge, or when I'm in combat. Sorry, it doesn't necessarily work outside combat, but you'll see later on whenever I'm in combat that green bar will go down whenever I sprint, dodge and attack as well. Moving on from that, if I go into my equipment, this is just what equipment I have on my character at the minute. You can wield 3 different items in your right hand and 3 different items in your left hand. So when I go back out onto my main character, if you look at my right hand, I have a dagger. If I push the right button on my D-pad, that will change what I hold in my right hand, so that should be a sword next, and then if I hit it again, that'll be a whip. If I change the left hand by pressing the left button on my D-pad, that'll change from a dagger to a short bow, and to finally my shield. So you can actually combine whatever way you want to have your character equipped. I can have my dagger on my right and my shield on my left. I can have my sword on my right and shield on the left. I can have my whip and a shield, whip and dagger, short bow. Now the short bow is kind of used for two-handed combat, so I'll explain later on how that works. But you can see already off the bat I can combine weapons and have different abilities depending on what situation I may find myself in. This is quite handy later on when you build your character for different scenarios. Sometimes you might just want to use ranged combat, sometimes you'll need a shield to block certain attacks, sometimes you'll want more damage, so you might go with 2 blades. The options are pretty much endless here. Moving on, going back into my equipment, you can see over here I've got different arrows that will determine obviously what is going into my longbow or shortbow. And down below I have bolts. Now bolts are for crossbows or similar style weapons, which I don't have at the minute, but they always go into this inventory slot anyway, just whenever you're collecting them. And then moving down, I've got my equipment, that my armor basically is what my character is using. I would say the armor in this game doesn't make too much of a difference in terms of your defense. It makes a very, very slight difference, but it's mainly for aesthetics and how your character looks. However, there's certain scenarios where you might want a bit more resistance to fire, for example, in which case I'll maybe change my different pieces of armor. But what I would say is whenever you're putting armor on, pay attention to what's happening on your very far right in your screen. I'll try and show you here. The very far right, it says, down the bottom, it says medium load or mid load. Whenever I put more armor on, depending on how heavy the armor is, that will then increase. If it goes to what's called heavy load, which I'll try and show you in a minute, there you go. It's just changed from medium load to heavy load. If I put too much heavy armor on and my character doesn't have enough strength, it means I can't dodge roll effectively, and I'm a bit slower as well, so very, very slow dodge roll, which is not very good. We don't want that at all, unless you have enough strength which your character can handle it, which mine doesn't. So I'm going to put back my bandit armor, and you'll see when I put that all back on again, I can dodge much quicker, which is what we want. Going back into our equipment, we then have talismans. You have different kind of trinkets and things you can pick up which will do different things for your character. I'll not cover that in too much detail, that's fairly self-explanatory. And down the bottom we have a list of all the items that we can equip on our character. Things like potions, throwing knives, poison resistance, they all go in this slot down here. Finally, we have, or next I should say, we have item crafting. The same as most kind of RPG games, you can collect a lot of different items in this game, and then you can craft certain other items from those collectibles. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to craft some poison bone darts with what I've collected. And then I'm going to put that into my equipment slot. It's already there, so I can use them whenever I'm out in the world. I'll take these other two off for now just to keep things simple and tidy. Our inventory is kind of an expansion of our equipment slot where it just shows you everything you've collected and everything you can use so far. There's quite a lot here. I'm not going to go into too much detail. You'll figure that out as you go through, but it's the same as most other games. If I press R1 and R1 and L1 up at the top, you'll see I have different slots in my inventory for crafting materials, key items, and so on and so forth, sorceries, incantations. All of that's at your disposal, and that's fairly self-explanatory. And then my status obviously is just all my numbers for my character, determining what I've put my points into, how much health I have, how much damage my weapons are doing, and so on and so forth. It's a lot of numbers, so I'm not going to cover it too much in detail, but you get the idea. If I was playing multiplayer, I can then add messages and summon other players. I'm playing offline at the minute, so that doesn't really apply to me. But over on the right hand side of the screen, you have a different area called your pouch. So that's whenever, if you're using items regularly and you really want to get to them quickly, you can just put them in your pouch. And I'll explain how that works in a second. And then finally, you have your gestures down here, where again, if you're playing in multiplayer or you want to take some screenshots, you can just use your different gestures for different poses that your character can do and different actions that he can do. There you go, you get the idea. So, coming on from that, remember we talked about the pouch and our item slot in our equipment up here. Whenever I go back into my main HUD here, you'll see if I press down on my D-pad, that cycles through the items in the bottom left hand side of my screen, and that is the ones that I put in my equipment slot. So you'll see whenever I crafted my poison darts and put them in my equipment slot, I now have access to them down here in my item slot. And I can change which item I want to use by pressing down, and to use the item I just press square. There we go. The pouch that I mentioned previously, if I hold in my triangle button, that brings up my pouch, and this is the items that I would use on a regular basis, such as my telescope, my spirits, my steed or my mount, and my fire pots. And again, by holding in triangle, I've got quick access to that, and if I press up on my D-pad, that will then use a fire pot. So that's basically how you'll set up your character to venture out into the world. I'll briefly talk here about how the combat system in the game works as well. At the minute, my character has 2 daggers on, which means if I press R1 with my controller, it's my right hand and it'll do a basic attack with my right hand. If I press L1, it will do a basic attack with my left hand. In fact, what I'll do is I'll just change my right hand. Yeah, so it's a basic attack with my left hand and a basic attack with my right hand. If I hold in my R2, that's a heavy attack with my right hand, like that. But what's interesting is whenever you hold in L2, it'll do the ability that you've allocated to your weapon. So each weapon you can allocate a different ability to, and if I push triangle, it'll show up my HUD here. On the left hand side you see what's called Stormcaller. That's the ability that I've put on this sword. So if I hold in my L2, it will do something called Stormcaller, which looks like this. However, if I change back to my dagger in my right hand, you'll see it's now called Reduvia's Bloodblade. So if I press L2 again, that's that weapon's ability. And if I change again to my whip, that's Storm Stomp, which is that. So you can put different abilities on different items and you can customize your character in that way. Whenever I wield 2 items of the same type in both hands, as in 2 daggers, the ability in my L1 changes to kind of a fast flurry of attacks like that, which is very, very good for my playstyle. But you can change it any way you want. You can have sword and dagger, you can have sword and shield, and you can see with my shield, that's a block. And my L2 again still works with my sword, just depending on what situation I find myself in. You can also wield your weapons with 2 hands if you don't want to have, one item in one hand and a different item in the other. If I hold in triangle and then hit my R1, that will then wield my sword with 2 hands, which means I'm focusing more on damage output, offense as opposed to defense. And again, that changes the attacks that I will do then. You can also block again by holding in your L1 instead of having your shield. You can just block with your sword. It's not quite as effective, but you get the idea. So going back to wielding in both hands, there we go. And I'm just going to set my daggers up again. That's the very basics of combat. It feels a bit complicated at the start, but you do get the hang of it, and you can sort of customize your character in terms of what exactly you want to use, and you can change it up for different scenarios as well. I'll just quickly discuss my short bow as well, because at the minute I've got a dagger in one hand and a short bow in the other. I need to use my short bow with 2 hands, so I'm just going to hold my triangle and hit L1, which means I'm now using my short bow with 2 hands, and that gives me access to my arrows. So that's the very basics of combat. I'm just going to show you how that all works whenever I take on a group of enemies. Okay, I'm just going to briefly show you how combat works when I take on a group of enemies. So if you look behind me here, there's some ruins. I have quite a few guards around, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to approach each guard in a different way. So beginning with this one here on the left, I'm going to quickly press L3 to go into stealth, and I'm just going to take my time. And if you all know me, I like playing as rogues and I do like a good backstab, so I'm going to sneak up behind him and do a quick backstab, which will take him out quickly and quietly. Going back into stealth, I'll move around to the other side and see what enemies we have over here. So I see another enemy here. I could just run in and backstab him again, however I'm going to pull him out. I'm going to switch to my short bow. If I hold in my L1, I can actually go into this kind of sight and see if I get a headshot here. There we go. So he's going to come after me now. I'm going to switch back to my double daggers. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait for him to attack. I don't have much defense here. I don't have a shield. I don't have heavy armor, so my defense is very low. So I'm going to wait for the chance to strike him. I'm going to let him attack me. I'm going to try and get behind him and get a few hits on him there. And just, you know, take your time. Whenever you go in really fast, it doesn't really tend to go very well. Take your time, wait for them to come to you, and then find your chance to strike back. I tend to find as well, a lot of enemies, if you go in trying to spam all your attacks quickly, they'll just respond with more and you'll end up just getting wiped out quite quickly. It doesn't really work that way. But if you take your time, find your opening, and then go in quickly, you can take them out quite quietly as well. There's another guard there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to my shield. So you'll see me blocking a few attacks whenever he comes in here, and I'm going to put my sword in my right hand. Just so you can see, this isn't normally the way I would play, however, it's just so you can see how I would block certain attacks and deal with it that way. So rather than dodging this character here, this enemy, I'm going to try and block some of his attacks. There, I hit my L2 by accident there, but you can see that did a weapon ability. So whenever he comes in, I'm going to raise my shield and try and block his attacks. There you go. You'll see my green bar, my stamina bar went down there as I blocked. Now he did a heavy attack there, so that took a little bit of health off me. But as long as I have enough stamina, I should be able to block quite a few of his attacks as well. If you block at the right time, I think it also staggers the enemy, which will create an opening for you to strike, like that. So what I'll do now is I'm going to try and block an attack, and I'm going to strike whenever I stagger him. And that was a heavy attack, so it took a bit of my health off. I'll try again, just to get the timing right. Come on. There you go. And again, I'll switch back to my short bow here, just to see if there's anybody down here I can take out. There we go. So I'll pull him back, go back into my short bow, 2 hands, and I'll just try and shoot him from here. Going to switch back to my double daggers, and I'm going to try and do as much damage as I can. Again, I'll wait for him to strike me, dodge around the back. Oops. Got the wrong weapon in my right hand there. There we go. Oh, I'm not doing very well here at all. There you go. Okay, so my health is down now. I'm going to use my item. If I scroll down to find one of my health potions, there, I'm going to drink it and get some of my health back. The other guards around here, if I can find some more, I'll try and show you how some of the items work as well. So there's one there. What I'm going to do is my pouch. If I press my triangle, I'm going to use one of my fire pots to bring him over and do quite a lot of damage from the start. There you go. That took him out straight away. And he's dropped an item here. I'm just going to see what that is. There you go. Got some soldier's greaves from him. Now there's 2 guards there. The one with the biggest shield, I don't want to take him on just yet. They're quite tough to kill. So if I find a chance, I'll try and pick him off individually. Oh, he's coming for me now. So I'm going to use some of my weapon skills on my dagger here first of all. If I press my L2, that's my dagger skill. That will put a burst of blood on him, which would make him bleed. I'm going to use a few more of them. Okay, so he does quite a lot of damage there with that spear, so I'm just going to wait for him to strike. I'm going to try something else. I'm going to try a jump and a heavy attack to try and break his stance. Again, just get a potion to get some health back. Jump and heavy attack. I've nearly got him down. A couple more of those. Oops, missed that one. There you go. Got him down. So finally we'll finish up with a good backstab. Why not? Why not? There we go. And that is pretty much how combat works in Elden Ring. It's quite tricky to get the hang of, but honestly, once you do get the hang of it and you oh, sorry. Let me finish that sentence another time. He's coming for more. There we go. And another one. He wants some more as well. No, where was I? Yeah, you get the hang of it once you get used to your character, your build. Now, the way I've built my characters, I don't have any spells or magic whatsoever. I tend to focus more on a lot of melee damage quite fast from the start, and that seems to work for me. That's kind of my playstyle. I'll use a bit of stealth, backstabs, and then fast sort of dagger strikes. The problem is I have very, very little defense, so I have to be very careful about where I am, what enemies I'm trying to attract. We'll try something else here. Why not? Yep. Get a bit overwhelmed. I might end up dying here, but you know what? This will be a good demonstration of something else I want to show you as well. So in the bottom right of my screen, you'll see a number which says 1787 at the minute. That is how many runes I have collected at this stage. Now, you gain runes from defeating enemies and from selling items as well. It's your main currency of the game, which you'll spend on leveling up and different skills in the game as well. Now, what you do whenever you visit one of the sites of grace, which I'll explain later on, you'll spend your runes on leveling up or skill points. It's also used for buying certain items in the game. However, I'm going to demonstrate now, whenever you die in the game, you will lose all of those runes that you've collected. So essentially you'll lose all your currency, which you need for buying stuff and for leveling up. But I'll just show you what happens here. My character's just died, and you'll see the runes I've collected will now be lost. And that's kind of the penalty of death in the game. But what I'll do is I have a chance to get them back. If I can get to the point where I died, I can collect those runes again, which you'll see hopefully in just a second. I've just resurrected here. You'll see on the compass on the top of the screen there's a little yellow triangle here, which is indicating, if I bring up a map, where I've lost my runes. Should be around there somewhere. There they are. So that's where I want to get all of those runes back again. That's very important, because if I lose them, well, I can get them back, but it's handier if I can just pick them up again. So what I'm going to do this time, I'm going to sneak in, try and get those runes, and sneak back out again, because I don't want to confront anybody else if I can help it. So that little glowing mark on the ground is where I dropped my runes. I might have to take out a few guards to get them back again, but that's okay. He's on his own now, so I'm just going to... Okay. Oh, wolf's there as well. Now, if I die a second time, I will lose all of those runes and I won't have the chance to get them back. So ideally, I'm going to try and get them. However, do you know what? If I die again, you'll see how that works too. You'll also see I'm gaining runes back again at this point. So I'll be able to use these runes on top of the ones that I can get back. Oh, I might not get them back. But you know what? I'm going to try. Let me see if I can get them. Okay, so I can pick them up again, and you'll see I've got all those runes back again. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use my pouch and hit the right button on my D-pad, which will then summon my mount. Now you'll see what I've done now is I've aggravated quite a few people in this area, so I'm either going to get out or I'm going to try some mounted combat, because I can still fight while I'm on my mount by using my L1, R1, R2, L2 buttons. I can still hit them with my sword, however I definitely am not doing enough damage here, and I wouldn't want to keep this up for too long if I can help it. But however, mounted combat is very handy for certain scenarios where you want to fly through like this and try and do some damage, but as I said, this is not ideal where you've got so many enemies trying to attack you and you're not doing a lot of damage in the output. So I'm going to just get out of this area right now and try and go somewhere else where I can show you a final bit of exploration at the end. And I just want to finally finish up this video with a little bit of exploration at the end, just so you can see how the massive open world works in this game. This is an area I have never been to before, so you can watch me just go through it briefly for the first time. I've just finished up this castle area behind me, and I've just emerged from the castle into this new landscape which I've never been to before. And I'm just going to see, well, I'm just going to show you how the open world works and how, you know, there's so many different things you can do and different places you can go. This little thing over here is called a Site of Grace. It's a bit like your checkpoint in the game. And what I'll do is I'll hop off and I'm just going to sit at that for a minute just so you can see how this works. These are everywhere. They act as checkpoints and respawn points and fast travel points in the games. They're very, very handy. But if I go in here, this opens up a different menu in terms of how I can then spend some of my runes. So if I want to, I can pass time between different parts of the day, morning, noon and night, and different things will happen at different times of the day. There'll be different enemies at night and different bosses at nighttime as well, as opposed to the daytime. So that's an option there. I can then go in and spend some of my runes and level up some of these attributes here. You can see the way I've spent a lot of mine is in dexterity, which will affect my daggers and my light armor and weapons, which I quite like. I've also put quite a few points into Vigor, which is my health. As a bandit, because I've got so little defense, I like to have a bit more health just so I can withstand a few more attacks. I've also put some into Mind for my focus points, my abilities, and Endurance for stamina as well. I can also change my flasks as well. I can add more charges to flasks depending on how or what weapons and items I'm using. I can also... Sorry, let me just go back one there. I can also change how many charges each flask has. The one on the left is my health, and the one on my right is my stamina, or sorry, my skill points. So if I want, I can have more flasks in my skill points and less in my health, or I can have more health flasks and less skill points. So because I don't use very many skills in the game, I use more of my just basic attacks and heavy attacks. I've actually allocated a lot of my flasks into health, which means I have 5 health flasks and 1 of my skill point flask. But you can change it any way you want. If you have more of a magic build, you might want more in your skill points, but it's entirely up to you. There's other things you can do as well. If you're here, you can choose different spells to go into your memory slots. You can see all of these spells have a red X for me, which means I can't use them. I don't have high enough intelligence or faith to use any of these spells. However, if you're more of an astrologer, sorcerer style class, then these will be perfect for you. You can also mix different flasks as well. You can sort out your storage and put different abilities onto different weapons in the game. So for example, if I bring up my sword, I can put different abilities onto my sword depending on what style I want to play as. And finally, if I have different armor that I can change, I can do them here as well, which I don't at the minute. But what this does is every time I rest at one of these sites, it will fill all my health and stamina flasks and health flasks, but it will also respawn all the enemies in the game, apart from the bosses. So it means you're sort of taking a risk at resting at these sites. Yes, you'll get all of your health and potions back, but you'll also maybe have to face some of the enemies again. And that's kind of the risk that you want to take whenever you're at these sites. So, as far as exploration goes, I've just come out of this castle. I've then come to this Site of Grace, and you can see this trail of light is pointing over in this direction. That's indicating the way that the main quest line is taking me. So, I'll also bring up my map, and you'll see this Site of Grace that I'm at is pointing up here. That's where this little trail of light's going, and that means the main quest, if I want to follow it right now, is up in this direction somewhere. So if I follow this faint trail of light up in this direction, you'll see the main quest eventually will lead me down here. And you can see every single bit of that land down there is fully explorable. There's multiple levels, there's a ground level, cliffs, castles, loads of stuff. So my main quest eventually will lead me down there somewhere, and you can just see the scope and the size of this game already. It's incredibly beautiful, incredibly huge as well. So I have no idea what's down there. However, whenever I came out of the castle, I did notice over here there's other ruins. So I bring up my telescope. I'm curious to see what's over there. So I want to go and check out what that building is over there. I've never been there before. So rather than exploring the main quest for now, I'm going to have a look over here and see what I can find. Now, because I've never been to this area before, I don't really want to mount up just yet. I could do, and I could just go a bit quicker through the area. However, whenever it's my first time playing through a new area, I quite like to do it on foot. Yeah, it's a lot slower, however, there's so much to discover and pick up in this game that I like doing it at this pace. This is kind of the pace I like to explore new areas in, just to kind of check it out, because you never know what you're going to miss if you're flying through it. So let's see what else there is. There's some cliffs over here. Let's climb up and have a look and see what we can find. There we go. There's another building straight over there. Let's go and see what that is. And over there as well. Although I don't think we can get to that just yet. No, that seems to be off a... yeah, no idea how to get over there, but it looks as if you'll be going there at some point. Just don't know how to just yet. So let's see what's up here. There's another building I've just seen. Curious to know what's up there. I can hear something moving. Don't know what it is yet. Oh god! What is that? Okay, I don't know what these are. They're pretty aggressive. Not very friendly. Let's just put it that way. Alright, I'm gonna have to do some combat here. This is a good way. But this is what I mean. Like, I've never been here before, and I did not know how to expect this at all. Oh god. I'll take one. Just focus on one at a time. Focus on one at a time. He's quite hefty. I might have to switch to a short bow. Just for a few extra bits of attack here. Yeah. Switch back to my daggers. Do not want to get hit by that heavy weapon that he's got there at all. There's an opening. Back out again. Back out again. Let him do his thing. Oh, that wasn't good. That wasn't good. They really do not want me getting in here. Right, I'm going to try and get around the back of him if I can. That was really bad timing there, and I just died. So, I've lost my runes again there. I might not go up there just yet. That looks quite heavy going up there, actually. Quite hefty. Okay, so I've just died and respawned there. I've lost my runes in that point, so I'm just going to quickly go back to where I died and get my runes back. I'm really curious to know what's up there, because normally in this game, whenever you see a lot of enemies protecting an area, there's normally something there. So I'm really curious to see what's up there, and I would love to get it on this video if I can. So we learned that area up there is protected by quite strong enemies, so I'm going to try and approach it a different way this time. I don't want to go in head first. That did not work out well that time. So classic Gaz, let's go into stealth mode and see if we can approach it in a different way. If there's anything at all we can do differently. This is kind of how the game works. You will die a lot of times, but you know, it's very, very easy to get frustrated with the game and think, oh, it's too hard, I don't want to do it. But every time you die, you learn something different. So let's try and approach it differently this time. I don't have very many materials. I've got holy water. That might be good against them. So let's get a few holy water pots and stick them in our equipment load. Now that should, in theory, be good against them. But let's see where they are first of all. Is that one there? There's one. Is that one? Right there. So there's the one that came at me the first time. I'm going to use a holy water pot on him. Missed him. Get him a bit closer. There we go. That took off half his health. Let's do that again. Now I've only got 3 holy water pots left, so I don't want to use them all at once. Those skeletons at the back seem to summon spirits. I can take him out. He doesn't have much health left now. Get in quick. Oh, I'm on my flipping short bow. Need to change that back. That was silly. Right. Nearly dead. Come on. There, he's done. Now, these two at the back here. Let's get our health back. Go back to the holy water pots. Let's try this again. Try and be as quick as we can. Avoid those, avoid those, avoid those. Throw. That's one down again. And thankfully my class has quite a lot of stamina, so I can run quite fast and for long periods of time. I think that's another one down. And finally, last one. Holy water to the face. Dodge out. I've got no holy water pots left, so I'm going to have to do this properly. He's taking quite a bit of damage, but anyway. Okay, so the tactic is try and get around the back of them. They're quite slow. So the good thing is I've got plenty of opportunity to attack. Get my stamina up. My stamina is quite low there, so I don't want that. Let him attack, get around the back, and a few quick hits and he should be down very soon. Now the thing about skeletons, sometimes they can respawn, so you want to hit them again when they're down just to make sure they don't come back. Right, that's that area clear. Well, I hope that's that area clear, I should say. Let's see what these guys were protecting up here. There you go. I don't know what that is, but I'm sure it's handy for something, because all these guys were not wanting me to get anywhere near here. Let's just see what that does. Uses FP to continuously heal nearby allies. Well, that could be very handy. So there we go. We've just we've got a new item in the game which we've never had before. We found a new area with new enemies, and it was completely unplanned. I just looked over there. I saw this. I wanted to see what was behind it. Got into a few fights and got an item at the end of it. So this is kind of how exploration in this game works. You just have a look and see what interests you, and I guess I'll be going down there next. That's where the story's taken me. So rather than spend the rest of this video doing all that, I think I'll end it there. But I hope that gives you a very brief beginner's guide to Elden Ring. I've tried to cover as much as I can there in terms of the menus, the combat system, exploration, but I have barely scratched the surface of this game. I haven't been playing for very long, but I think I've kind of got the hang of the basics of it now. So I think I'll call it a day there. I would highly recommend picking up the game for anybody. Even if you do find it frustrating at the start, you do get the hang of it. Every encounter teaches you something about how to approach it differently, and the whole point of the game is that you will overcome it eventually. So that's all for now, guys. Thanks very much for watching, and